as you know, we're kind of having this discussion and talking about this. If you want to come back to this question, if you want to just leave something in the chat for me, that would be great and helpful as well. So, you know, like I said previously, the purpose of this period is we want to get as much feedback as possible. We want to ensure that all communities and needs are reflected in this plan. So my next question is, how can the Arizona Broadband Office ensure the public comment period is an equitable process? You know, of course, our immediate thought and what other states are doing is we're going to post the plan online and then wait for public comment through a forms or a survey. Well, as we are seeing with the digital equity plan, not everyone has access to the internet. Not everyone can use the internet. So I'm just curious what our thoughts is. How can we make this more equitable so we are getting feedback from lots of communities here?
If you have identified subgroups, which is what I assume you're calling communities, the office or the people overseeing the public comment period should do outreach to the various communities, not necessarily through the internet, but by personal visits or phone calls or other immediate ways. For example, I represent the older population with visual impairments, or people with visual impairments. They have a difficult time getting on the internet and using computers, either through resources and for information. So how is that community being addressed if they are known to have limited access and are more isolated? And that would go for other parts of the Arizona community that have disabilities and also would have difficulties just finding a website.
I actually want to put in a comment towards that, because I do know that the older community also reads the newspaper more often than not. Is there something that we are doing about reaching local news?
That's a great point. That's definitely an avenue we can explore. How can we move this public comment period to newspapers and the news, or even social media and Facebook as well?
I think another good source for information as far as like paper style would be our public libraries. They oftentimes have boards where we could hang things up.
Great, thank you for that.
Lillian, I think reaching families through schools is also another way that the information can at least, get home.
Mm-hmm.
Get to, certain low-income communities or underserved communities that otherwise may not have the ability to get this information, as you said, like online. The other thing, and I put this in the chat, sorry about that, is you really need a full-blown marketing campaign. Like, you need to be able to go where people are. And that includes laundromats, and that includes, Spanish-speaking households. So, our Spanish-speaking media, possibly either figuring out ways to get some earned media around this. People don't know. I mean, I feel like we have kind of this inner circle of I see the same people on these calls, and I see, and that's great. I mean, but I never see like Joe Smith or, anything like that. So, I mean, I think that there's like this real need to market it and then go to where the people are. And literally, if that means door to door, or if that means, with a survey checklist in hand, I agree with the mayor. I don't think you're going to be able to ensure that, that everybody is part of this comment period, but you have to figure out ways to get at least a few more people involved in this. It's particularly those groups that Robert was talking about, that we oftentimes, don't think about, or they're overlooked because they're too hard to reach.
And do we have anything for low income people? We talk about low income, but are we in communication with access? Do they have this on their, website, advertising it?
That's that's a great idea I hadn't considered. How do we move this to other websites that people access regularly? I mean, I'm sure the average Arizonan is not going on the Arizona Broadband Office's website on a regular basis. So you make a great point.
But they are watching, like for specifically Hispanic media, like they're watching Univision. They're watching, their programs, I guess you could say. In some cases, while it's very expensive, that's the way to reach people is,
Something that I have thought about a lot, and beyond just accessing the document and accessing how they give us feedback or engage with us on this plan, is ensuring that everyone fully understands the plan itself. We're producing this large document. I want to make sure that everyone not only can access it, but is, comprehending it and understanding what the purpose of it is. I'm curious if anyone has any ideas on that.
well, there's a lot of it I don't understand. And since nobody else is speaking up, dare I say, dumb it down?
Okay. I appreciate your honesty.
I mean, I'm in this all the time and I'm reading and I'm learning and I'm talking to people, and there are just parts of it that just go over my head. And so I can only imagine, somebody who this is not their bailiwick at all. And suddenly they're being asked to, digest this kind of information. It's a lot.
I agree with you. That's a great.
Sorry.
Maybe have
Sorry,
like
that
some
would
kind
be-
of video.
Okay, so we've kind of touched on this question already. I want to make sure that all corners of Arizona understand that we have this important public comment period happening and that we want their feedback. And so we've touched on a lot of ideas like how we can access newspapers or other organizations, community centers, libraries. We don't have to touch on this again, but if anyone has any ideas, please throw them in the comments. Again, I really want to make sure it's more than just Maricopa County, more than just Pima County that's accessing this opportunity.
I'll just jump in and say, as somebody who is used to speaking to diverse audiences, the first thing I do is to make sure that it is relevant to my audience. So you really have to make sure that your audience understands why their participation and their comments are so important to the development and the deployment of this plan. And I also agree that using community spaces and connecting with trusted community partners is going to be paramount, because yes, you guys could go door to door, but you're not trusted in communities. So if you're going to connect with a community partner who that community trusts, you're not going to get as many doors slammed in your face. You'll get better participation.
That's a great point. Thank you for that. And you just sparked something in my head. I foresee us really collaborating with all of you on this call to make sure that this is an equitable process, that we are reaching as many people as possible to participate in this. And here's my last question regarding this. Are there any resources or guidance that we, the broadband office, can provide that would be helpful during this process? Even if it's like an FAQ sheet, like a dumbed down version of the plan, a video, whatever it may be, what could help, the average person reading this plan to digest it and understand it and be able to provide us feedback.
I think a video is definitely something that might be needed. I think you would be able to break it down and show, talk, everything you in a presentation that you can do.
Lillian, are you guys going to be going into tribal nations as well?
We will have an outreach plan with our tribal nations, yes.
Okay, yep. So then just keeping in mind that some of their languages are spoken, not written. So yes, like a mix of FAQs and videos. And like Access requires that all of the material that goes out to their participants is at a fifth grade reading level or below. And there is software out there to help with radical readability. So I would encourage the use of that.
Thank you.
Wow.
That's fantastic advice.
And an audio version of the plan, or at least a synopsis of it for the visually impaired community. I know a Braille version would be very difficult, but an audio version available, maybe it could be distributed through the Talking Book Library or something like that, would help inform the members of our communities that are visually impaired and would like to know about obtaining access and the availability of access to technology that would improve their lives.
Thank you for that.
Have we ever thought of trying to do an event for communities, like having city council members advertise a event in order for them to know more what's going on, a luncheon or a happy hour?
Yeah, well, you know, we're still in the planning process, but the Digital Equity Week or Digital Inclusion Week is the first week of October, and we're hoping to have this period start the second or third week of October. So I want to use that as an opportunity to host some kind of public event or some kind of outreach with people.
Lillian, is any part of the plan going to talk about the adoptability or the adoption issue? Because I know that on the tribal lands, that's come up a lot. Like, why do I need the internet? I've gone this long without it, and there's so many benefits and so many reasons that people can be online and be happy and healthy and safe and not, learn about scams and learn about all of those kinds of things to keep them safe, which is kind of what we do at Common Sense, like that whole digital inclusion space. But, like, how do we get people to understand the value of being online and why all of the things that they would have access to? We all know what they are because we've been working in this space, but I think some people just don't see it that way. They kind of see being on the internet as being on social media, and it's clearly more than that.
Well, it's more than that. I can give an example from when we were locked down with COVID. I helped many of the seniors in my senior area. I'm in a 55 plus community who didn't use or have access to to computers or smartphones, and that was the only way you could sign up for the vaccines at the beginning of the rollout of the vaccines. And I would go around and I would sign them up. I would get the emails and have to hand deliver them when their appointments would be and give them directions to where to go. And I got the reminders of when there were time for their second shot, and I had to go and tell them and get it scheduled, but because they didn't have access to the internet. So that's why the older community and the disabled community need to have a special focus in the digital equity plan that will ensure that not only they know about the availability of broadband, but its benefits, and then aid in setting it up for them.
Thank you for that input. Of course, we are going to touch on older communities, communities facing disabilities and broadband adoption within the plan. But just to reiterate, this is actually the purpose of this public comment period. We can read the plan, we've been working on it and say, oh yeah, we've definitely covered X, Y, and Z. But then we put it out and someone who hasn't been working on reads it and says, wait a second, broadband adoption is not covered well in here. And so that's the kind of feedback we're looking for during this period.
Well, then that addresses the first question you had about the outcomes or the goals. Did we appropriately address, on the basis of the feedback from the public comment period, this area of implementation of the use of broadband in these communities? Did we get information did any of these communities make contact with us and provide comment? If they didn't, then that's a flag for you that you didn't reach that particular community segment.
Thank you. That's fantastic feedback.
This is Mayor McFarlane, and one of the biggest challenges that municipalities and towns and cities, all municipalities have is how do we communicate to our citizens? It's very difficult considering all the different ways that people receive information. Used to be you could put an ad in a newspaper or send it out in an article in a newspaper and everybody would get it and everybody know what was going on. Well, today that's not true. When our circulations are down in all of our newspapers, young people don't get the newspaper. It's really, really hard. One of the things we've tried to do as a municipality is to have our community opt in, but then again, you have to be connected to opt in. So how do you hand carry that opportunity out to those that are underserved? A lot of ours come to a lot of those to our library. The elderly come to our senior center. So we have ways we can communicate with them, but it's really, really hard. And even our whole homelessness the task force that we have is probably the hardest thing I've ever had to work on, is to try and get people that you can communicate with and get them help. And it's, the broadband is very similar in that it is a one-on-one, hand-to-hand combat in terms of getting people access, especially those who need it probably the most. And it's so it's a challenge and it's not easy. So I don't envy you trying to do this, Lillian. So that being said, I think everyone on this call is obviously here because we care and we want to try and find ways to help. And so the League of Cities would be a good resource for you. I know somebody mentioned that earlier. They are a great organization. They have direct contact with all 91 cities and towns in Arizona. I would definitely use them, ask for their help, and make sure that they help get that information out, at least to the cities. And the cities most of us have pretty good communication with our citizens. And if we don't, we know where our weaknesses are. And so you might help them with those weaknesses if you have some resources and or ideas. So that's my suggestion. I think that you have a very large task ahead of you, but I think you also have a lot of people who are willing to help.
Yes, we definitely do. Oh, go ahead, Maggie.
Thank you. Hi. Yeah, my name's Maggie Ferry. I'm the Director of Intergovernmental Affairs for Governor Hobbs. And we actually earlier this week announced to the administration and the League of Cities and the County Supervisors Association a broadband advisory council for interagency and community members. And on that council, we have one representative delegated by the League of Cities and Towns and one delegated by the County Supervisors Association. So that first meeting will be in September, but after that, we're hoping that we'll have a really robust conversation with localities and different community members about how to incorporate and collaborate on all of these projects.
Thank you, Maggie.
Yeah, and Lillian, another opportunity might be, and I don't know if it's too late to sign up, but the League of Cities has their annual conference the last week in September, and there are booth opportunities there. to potentially disseminate information to all the cities and towns, because all of their staff are there, all the council members are there, which you very rarely get everybody all in one spot. And it could be a really good opportunity to at least get some information out to people. You could reach out to the League of Cities and talk to them and see if it isn't too late to get signed up. It's down in Tucson this year, so.
Great, thank you. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Hi, this is RJ Pesky from Hojo Cybersecurity. One of the interesting dynamics in my line of work is that, you know, we're addressing security, and, you know, it's a very complex and fascinating topic for a lot of people. But what we find talking about security is that it tends to be really scary, and people tend to get really overwhelmed with the subject matter pretty fast. So what we find works in the dialogue is examples, relevant examples. You know, I oftentimes will use everyday examples like applications or iPhones, you know, things that consumers are touching, or even, you know, the small businesses I'm working with. So it makes sense to them. The other thing that we find works is working through trusted organizations like like nonprofits or churches tend to have a lot of value. And also like providers like myself, because we are a native owned entity, it holds a lot of weight. When we arrive in the community, there's excitement, and they're more open to listening to partners like us. So one of the things that I'm talking with my client about on the Navajo Nation is kind of this problem around cyber and the rollout of broadband, and we're looking at ways to address this conversation. So we are looking through a nonprofit partnership. We're looking through, through some other public partnerships with Amazon and some of the other big names, so they can kind of help with that last mile conversation with examples, so the technology then becomes real. So I just wanted to offer that from a private perspective.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, like I said previously, you know, we aren't going to implement this until mid-October. That is when the draft will go public. In the meantime, the advice, the feedback, the input you all have given us right now has been incredible and has given me a lot to think about on how we can do this in an equitable manner. And we're not just, you know, soliciting feedback from the same 40 stakeholders that we continuously see. If you think of other ideas or other questions or other kind of roadblocks you might think that we will encounter during this period, please feel free to message me, email me, reach out to me, and I would love to talk about those things.
Lillian, are you wrapping up at this point?
Yes.
Okay, then I would go ahead and bring up this additional point that I wanted to add then. I think a lot of the messaging seems to be, and maybe appropriately, mostly centered around broadband access. But I would also like to suggest that some of the messaging get out there that reflects that there will be, how can we put it, skill development potentially available. So, you know, a lot of people, once they got access, if they don't have the skills to use it, what good does the access do them? So for, say, the elderly, or say the disabled, or say the homeless that haven't developed any skills in using digital systems and materials and items, you know, devices, they may say, well, you know, why does this matter to me at all? And even if it did matter, if I was convinced it was going to matter, because I would eventually be able to make my medical appointments or pay my bills or the like of that nature. Well, yeah, but I can't use a computer anyway.
And I appreciate that feedback.
So Andy, I will just tail dove off of that and say, then we also have to have available connected devices for those who cannot afford them. And I know we have the ACP, but we've got people out there who are pretty nervous because they've heard it's ending, but we don't have an end date yet. And that's just a part of the equitable piece.
Thank you, Carrie.
I agree with Carrie that, I mean, that's a big piece, 20 million homes. I mean, they just announced 20 million homes across the country have signed on with ACP, and that could go away, tomorrow. What happens to equitability when those 20 million people, and I can get the number for Arizona, it's pretty big.
It's
What happens
somewhere
when
around
it goes away?
500,000.
How much, what is it, Andy?
Somewhere around 500,000, according to Henry, as our discussion earlier today.
Okay, that sounds about right. So yeah, I mean, we're talking about 500,000 people who are counting on even this, relatively small stipend every month or benefit every month, and to have it go away, if they're not all in on the internet, they may just say, well, I can't afford this anymore. And so there has to be something in the plan if ACP goes away to address other low cost options, whether it's through ISPs or through cities or through the state.
Yes, thank you. This is exactly the type of feedback that we want to hear. What do we want as a community to see in this plan? Thank you. So this kind of goes into my next question, and this is just a broad question for everyone. We on the digital equity side have this monthly kind of discussion, and luckily we could make it more of an interactive discussion this time. But going forward, as we move along this process and finish up this planning process and have this plan, what would you as stakeholders want from the Arizona Broadband Office? What do you need from us?
Lillian, this is Robert with OEO. I missed a large part of your presentation. I apologize for that. I had to jump on a call with one of my people I've been trying to get a hold of. But on that note, I would like to see a heat map of where our needs are. I know one thing about Arizona, which I always find unique in comparison to other states, is we don't really have like barrios and in terms of like an East Coast world where there's an Italian on one end and then you have different nationalities on the other, and then you go down the street, it's a whole different ballgame. We're kind of integrated in Arizona. So to really see these areas that are hit hard, that have been identified as the most need for either equity training or access or equipment, I think would be something that we can look at and say, yeah, we can work on that area to get them up to par. Because otherwise, you're going to be shooting in the dark, trying to find out, what's the reality, when the reality is really just in the data. So, I would love to.
Who the Alluvion's moving into Casa Grande. They're tribally owned. They're also, getting broadband out to the Gila River community, which owns the company. So there's a lot of movement in that area and a lot of different options that I think we're not aware of, at least as a community, as a city. And if we're going to be out there trying to help communicate this, it'd be nice to know who all the suppliers are. And that mapping that Robert suggested, I think is a great idea.
Great, that's fantastic feedback. Thank you. Well, like always, if you ever think of anything you need from our office, whether it be more engagement, different types of communications, please reach out to me. I would love to hear your feedback and have that discussion. Like I said to begin with, I was going to touch on those digital equity surveys. So we are not done collecting data for our plan. This last portion, this digital equity survey, has been up on our website and it has been distributed in paper form. If anyone from my team or anyone that has the link ready to go, please drop that survey link in the chat. If you have not taken it yet, I really, really recommend you take it. It does close on the 18th. So it is closing very soon. So again, if you have not taken it, please go ahead and take it. If you need a paper copy, please email me and I will send you a PDF that you can print out to distribute to whoever it may be. Again, we of course have our monthly table conversations that you can register for via our website, and then our contact us form is on our website as well. And that goes out to all of us on the broadband team, including myself. And like I said previously, here are emails. My email is that second one up there. If you just have a general question or a comment for the team itself, you can definitely contact our inbox, broadband@azcommerce.com. So that is it for our conversation this month. I want to leave a little time if anyone has any general questions or comments for us.
Actually, I did, Lillian, I put it in there for you. What would you say are the three main goals of the digital equity plan for Arizona? Like, what is it, the overall overarching 30,000 foot view? 3 goals.
I mean, I don't think our overarching goal is that unique compared to everyone else. We want to make sure every single person here in Arizona, in rural, suburban, urban, tribal, everyone knows how to use the digital resources they have. You know, we're gonna do this huge broadband infrastructure push, and like everyone on this call knows, that's wonderful. If people aren't using it, is it that wonderful? That's a great question.
So there's just one big overarching goal.
Well, within the plan, of course, we're going to have multiple goals. But if I'm just talking about what is the digital equity goal in general in Arizona.
Well, that's my city's goal, so I'm glad that we align.
Wonderful.
Hey Lillian, this is Crystal. Just wanted to let you know I did drop the link to this survey in the chat. So if you go to that survey, you can navigate to sort of which organization, either individual or community organization that you're responding to, like which survey. And then also I am the GIS analyst, and I hear you loud and clear with the heat maps. I think that's a great idea.
Thank you, Crystal. And I am now just kind of scrolling through the chat, and
I did want to add one. I just wanted to bring up one thing. I really love the discussion. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing about this. Part of what the state has to do in this one-year planning period is to really consider and make plans for covered populations. That's the grant term for it. But that's I say that because the needs of these communities, like if we problem solve there's digital equity solutions for all these covered populations. So low income households, aging populations, incarcerated individuals, veterans, people with disabilities, people with language barriers, racial and ethnic minorities, and rural inhabitants. It feels like a scientific term, but it's like the ways that we care for all of these groups we can incorporate into, and we need to incorporate into Arizona's plan. So we don't have to get that solved in the last 12 minutes, but think about your plans and what works in your communities for all of those other areas too. Sometimes it doesn't look like, is this the definition of digital equity? I don't know. So you're already doing.
Thank you for that input, Nicole. And just as a reminder, Nicole is our federal programs officer from NTIA. Her contact is in the chat. Well, if we have no other outstanding questions or comments, we can definitely end 10 minutes early. Everyone can have this 10 minutes to themselves. Nobody work, just relax for the next 10 minutes. I will go through the chat. I see a lot of great feedback that I didn't touch on, but don't worry, it's all recorded. I have it. Like always, please feel free to reach out to myself or anyone on the broadband team. Even if you don't know who the question should go to, we will help direct that question for you. And if you haven't registered for next month's monthly table conversation, please do so. And I'm going to push it again. Please take the survey, the digital equity survey, if you have not yet. I appreciate everyone joining this call and the amazing discussion we had today.
Real good meeting, Lillian. Thanks.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you, everyone.